Welcome back to a new episode of the Win More, Live Better podcast. Now, today's guest is one that I'm excited about for a number of reasons. One is the roles get to be kind of switched here because I was really fortunate a few years ago to go on his podcast that has been around for years now, and it's had a deep impact on the coaching and leadership profession. And so I'm excited to swap roles today and have a conversation with John O'Sullivan. So, John, before we jump into the conversation, I just want to give a lot of appreciation to you for the work that you've done in this space, the impact that you've had. I've definitely gleaned a lot from the episodes that I've watched and that I've listened to from your own podcast over the years that you and Jerry Lynch have done. So, anyway, without further ado, I'm just appreciative of you being on today's episode.
Well, thank you, man, and thanks for all the amazing work you do. Obviously, I've followed your work for a long time, which is why we had you on a couple of years back. And I pretty much stay off all social media except for LinkedIn, and I'm on LinkedIn because of people like you who just post, great videos and super interesting content. And I always get so many ideas from you. So thanks for what you do because you're a big influence on me.
Awesome. Well, yeah, no, again, it's very much reciprocated and the respect runs deep. And You know, what I'm excited about is we're going to get into kind of a new project that you and Jerry are releasing here in the form of a new book on a topic that I think is going to be of great interest to coaches, not just coaches, but I think anybody that's interested in leadership development. And in particular, how do you maybe develop the next generation of leaders? But before we get into that, I do want to make sure that the guest, or I'm sorry, not the guest, but the audience tuning in today truly knows who John is first and foremost. So I know in looking at your career, it's taking you from being a student athlete yourself to a coach, a youth sports reformer, a culture consultant, leadership author, podcast host. Like that's a lot of different hats that you've worn, but also gives you, I'd imagine, just a wonderful perspective on everything. What's been maybe the consistent passion that you've carried across all of those, and maybe kind of the problem that you've been kind of solving as you kind of transition into your professional work over the years?
I think it goes back into I know the tremendous impact that sports had in my life and through teammates, through great coaches, through not so great coaches, through overcoming injuries, coaching, realizing what that was all about, and really trying to make a difference. And I have my own kids who are in college now, but when they were really young, I was like, man, this is kind of different, right? And the way the sort of seriousness of it, way before it needed to be serious, the misconception that it can either be competitive or enjoyable, all these sort of things, and so that was kind of my transition out of full time coaching into full time advocacy for young athletes and high school athletes and college athletes. Of can we create a better environment? And a coaching mentor of mine once said to me, John, the question you should always ask yourself at the end of a practice session is, would I want to be a player in that practice? And if the answer is yes, it was probably pretty good and your players probably had a good time and they'll come back. But if the answer is no, you probably shouldn't keep doing that. And I think it's just a really important question. And so I would take that into sort of the bigger thing. Would I want to be a kid in that car ride home? Would I want to be a kid in that household? Would I want to be a player in that practice? Would I want to be coached by that coach? All that sort of stuff. And so that's what I do through books, through podcasts, through blogs, and yeah, it's been quite the journey.
Are there things that you look back on through either your own athletic journey or the like being a head coach that you felt like taught you about leadership that maybe a book couldn't, and or maybe it's something that through some experience directly that those experiences shaped your perspective on leadership?
Well, I grew up in a household where both my parents had their own businesses. My dad, before he actually became a lawyer, before that he was a New York City firefighter, and he got injured and he was forced to retire. But he spent then 56 years as a volunteer firefighter. He was a chief, um, and I think, you know, so I have a brother and a sister. We all own our own businesses, and we never sat around a dinner table with our parents complaining about their boss, right? So if you talk about leadership, I think it comes down to like accountability and intentionality. And I think it's no mistake that three of us learned a lot from watching the dynamics in our own house, and how you lead. And I think the biggest thing is like, first, like, model it, right? If you want to lead, you have to do everything that meets or exceeds the standards and the values. You can't lead through words. You lead through influence. You lead through actions. And I think that was always really clear from a young age, so that, you know, as I was an athlete growing up, and a high school captain and a Division I college team captain, like, thankfully, I think I had some decent role models because no one taught me how to do it, right? And I think when Jerry and I decided to write this book, we got one of my favorite endorsements was from Shane Battier, NBA great, Naismith Player of the Year of college. And he said, you know, when he read the book, he's like, we have to stop treating leadership as a character trait and start treating it as a skill. And if it's a skill, it can be taught and it can be developed. So we can't just go, oh, where are the leaders? Like, where are the leaders we have developed is really a better story. And so I think from my life, I had good examples. And I wish someone then had said, realize the power of your influence, and maybe put a few words or ideas to help me frame, like, oh, that's what I'm doing, or that's what I'm not doing. you know?
You know, one thing that I want to dive into that, and I love that distinction of character, not just viewing leadership through the lens of character, which is again sometimes perceived as a you either have it or you don't, or it's permanent. Whereas this is a skill, this is a behavior that can change, that can be modified, that can be grown and strengthened, and so on. What I'm also interested just for like a moment is, did you have a specific moment or experience that maybe revealed to you that some of the biggest challenges in today's landscape, they're not the technical, they're not the tactical, because there's all sorts of great coach and leadership development out there in those aspects of the game. But what you've poured a lot of your life's work into is developing humans and developing leaders and seeing a need for that, creating a better environment. So I'm just curious, was there a moment or experience for you that really was a catalyst for that?
You know, this is the fifth book, and these are written books for parents and coaches, and then how to be a great teammate. And um, but what's really consistent, right? So I work with a couple of college programs, and certainly have plenty of friends who coach at that level or coach in the professional level. And it's a very constant, like, refrain of like, man, where have the leaders gone? Like, I feel like when we were growing up, leaders just emerged, and now they're not. And so, like anything, right? There's a pain point, so solve the pain point, right? And so I think a lot of coaches feel helpless. They look at their roster like, I don't have any leaders, so I'll just pick the captain, or I'll just, or sorry, I'll pick the senior, or I'll pick the oldest player or whatever and make them the captain. And it's oftentimes not the person who should be. And so it was just this observation of, there's a need to train this, and coaches are busy, right? Athletic directors are busy. And I think we have a movement in sports where people at the youth sports level, for the most part, are realizing that it's got to be about more than just developing sports skills, that we're in the human development business, and we want to give them something left. And then in sort of like high end clubs and high end programs, some of those directors have said, you know what? We realize that if all the coaches, all the college coaches are saying we need more leaders, then why shouldn't we be developing them? That's a value add for our kids in our program when they're being recruited of like, oh yeah, I've done 3 years of leadership training as well through our program. And so there's just this coming together of, you hear things. I always call it like the Toyota effect, right? You buy a Toyota and then you realize they're everywhere. And like, you just hear it and you're like, wait a sec, everyone's asking for this. And it's a topic that I really care deeply about and wanted to take a deeper dive into as well. And then I had like on my notes on my iPhone, right? Like ideas for chapters for 2 years. And then Jerry's like, hey, I want to write a leadership book for captains. I'm like, oh, I got an outline already, and here we go. So there you go.
I love it. I love it. I think I I want to come back to some of your own perspective and beliefs around leadership and how those have evolved, not only through the work that you've done, but the people that you've interviewed on your own podcast, the teams that you've been part of their ecosystems and tried to help serve them. But I want to let's dive into the book here a little bit. And I'm interested for a moment just of like, what is it about this topic and this existing problem where you feel as though it needs maybe more attention that maybe it has historically kind of received and kind of what if you could kind of go into more of like the gap that you feel like this book might help those trying to foster more leadership in student athletes where you see this kind of being a helpful resource for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things. It's a, big question, right? No, number one is maybe the false assumption that a leader is someone who is incredibly vocal and rallies his or her team and, is just this incredible personality and all that, right? And that's the only leaders, right? Yet some of the greatest leaders are really quiet, right? And they lead with their actions. Shane Battier again, the no stats all star, I think Michael Lewis called him, right? You know, didn't show up on the stat sheet, but yet the teams he was a part of always won, right? This is Bill Russell. This is people like that, Tim Duncan, and obviously incredible players. But what can I give to my team? So this idea that in our leaders, I'm looking for the big vocal personality. But that's not necessarily the person who influences people on the team a lot. Um, Number two, just challenges, right? So what do coaches, what do say to us? And again, I had two kids who were captains of their own high school teams, and I asked them, and then we interviewed a bunch of coaches, and they put us in touch with their team captains, college coaches, high school coaches. What are the biggest challenges your kids face? And so now with the Gen Z and Gen Alpha athlete who've grown up with technology, one of the big challenges is having difficult conversations in person, right? I always tell the story. Like I drove a van of kids once from Oregon, where I lived, to California for a soccer event. And one of the girls in the van started dating and broke up on the van ride, right? And I'm like, so this is a different world. Number two, holding your friends accountable to the standard when they're not meeting it. Um, Being a bridge between coaches and parents and your team and maintaining trust. Leading from everywhere, right? So if you're on the bench or you're injured, you're still a leader. And one of the cool stories we just had a couple weeks ago, Dusty May on the podcast, and he was on enough for this book, for this story, to make it just into one of the challenges sections. But he said his proudest moment of this season, when Michigan was national champions in basketball, was one of their players tore his ACL 2/3 the way through the season. LJ Kaysen, I think his name was, and he said, you know, didn't miss a beat. Just started saying, "Oh, how can I support my team? How can I help?" And he's on the bench. And by the end of the season, they called him like Coach Kaysen or something like that, because here was this player who was a contributor on the court who got injured. Instead of moping and whatever, he put off surgery until after the season so he could continue to travel and support his team. He said, in what some people say is the best college basketball team of all time. That's my proudest moment. That a kid who got hurt said, "What can I give?" And I think that that's the kind of stuff that we have to teach kids over and over and over. Of like, you are always leading, not just when you're on the field. And if you can't lead everywhere, you're not a leader. So I think it's just things like that that ooh, sometimes by putting it in a book chapter or sharing a story like that, a kid goes, "Oh, he's talking about me." Um, and then doing the work and answering some questions and really reflecting on leaders you admire, captains you admire, and places where you're leading well and places that you're missing. I think this is just, if it's a skill, we should be teaching it.
Example in that story that you shared with Dusty May, it's great because it speaks to maybe the distinction very similar to like playing time where a player may feel as though because they are not getting regular minutes or getting regular time on the field that maybe says something about their value to the team. When reality is like we all know that every single person on a roster has value in its own way. It doesn't mean that they're all equal, doesn't mean that they're all necessarily the same, but every person does. In the same vein, too, whether or not you have a leadership title or a captain title doesn't mean that you don't still have a lot of value to contribute in how you influence the people in that locker room. One of the things that I appreciated as I got a chance to like read some of the book was just kind of how you guys organized it, how you and Jerry kind of split it into kind of these three kind of core parts. The first one I kind of want to start with, which is this idea of like just what are some of the qualities of a great team captain? Some of those I think very much align with things that we've heard probably for years now, centuries even of describing great leaders, but in your guys' own words, what were some of the ones that you felt like kept coming up over and over with your own research, your own experiences, and the people that you were interviewing?
Yeah. So the way we broke up the book was, part one, qualities, part two, responsibilities, part three, challenges. And amongst these qualities, um, number one, self awareness. I have to know myself. I have to know what makes me tick. I have to get an understanding of what drives me. We talked about it a little bit, modeling behavior, right? That's where it starts. Selflessness. Gratitude is one that people don't think about. We use the word in our teaching a lot, love, like loving your teammates, right? Competing, like really competing. I think a lot of athletes. So we had this one didn't make the book, but we just had on the podcast Ryan Wasowski, who is the San Jose Sharks head coach. And he's talking about one of his players, Macklin Celebrini. He's second year in the league this year. He's 19 years old. He's already a leader. He's captaining Team Canada right now at the World Championships. He says, when you're an 18, 19-year-old NHL locker room, you don't have a voice unless you're walking the walk. He's like, he's the fittest guy when we show up to preseason. He plays every practice and every game like it's the last time he's ever going to get to play. That's the passion and dedication and competitiveness he goes about his business. And when you do that, it doesn't matter what year you are, people are going to respect you. They might not like you, but they're going to respect you. And so I think these are the type of things, like how I compete, how I love people, how I show my gratitude, how I model things. These are the qualities of great leaders, and identifying them and then being, one place where maybe I need to do a little better is this. That's a pretty important thing. So getting my narrative close to the truth, right? Of like, this is who I am, and these are where how I need to develop, and that's leadership right there. And so I think from a quality standpoint, any athlete can look at this list and go, yeah, you know what? This one I'm really good at. That one not so much.
Think what you're, maybe speaking to in a way is that knowing doing gap, right? It's like,
Hmm.
okay, well, there's awareness is great, and that's like kind of the first step. And I love that that's how you open with the first quality. But then it's like, okay, how am I living it? Do my actions align with my words? What I also think is interesting, going back to what you were talking about earlier, that maybe distinction between just viewing leadership from the character trait lens as this like trainable skill. How how trainable are all of these characteristics from your guys' experiences? And are there one or two examples that you could maybe share that you all maybe do or that you've done with teams to kind of help a certain leader maybe increase the gap between the knowing and the doing?
Yeah. So we're very intentional about our words, and the subtitle of the book is "The Athlete's Guide to Being an Exceptional Team Leader," not becoming, being. And what leadership is a way of being. It's how I choose to interact with the world, and it's a choice, right? And so, um, these certain behaviors, these things you need to do, are choices that you make every day. And the more times you choose the right thing, the more influence you're going to have. So I don't necessarily have a choice of how tall I'm going to be, but I do have a choice how I'm going to treat people, right? And so like one specific skill we might call, when we do this with coaches as well, like the rule of one person, one comment, one time, right? If I'm a senior and I have a freshman or sophomore on my team, he or she's a good player, that's why they're on the team. You know what? It might be them on the line with a one-on-one in the state playoffs, you know, to help me advance my senior season. So wouldn't I want them to feel belonging and a part of it and feel loved and respected, and it's okay to make a mistake and we pick each other up and acknowledge, versus, oh my God, the season's on the line, I'm on the line, and I think everyone hates me. And so I think these are like these things. So recognizing your influence. And these are life skills, right? So last week I gave a talk for 175 firefighters, right? Central Oregon wildland firefighters, all the leadership people, like they call them ICs, incident commanders, incident coordinators. And you said, what's a moment where you could have led and you didn't and you missed it? Um, and one guy said, he goes, I realize after this conversation, every morning at our morning briefing, I sit down with the same three people. I sit next to them, right? That I know well. But I have all these other people on my team that I could just be intentional about sitting next to them every morning and moving around my group and connecting and learning about everyone. That's a really powerful signal that I value you, I care about you, I'm invested in you. Now, in a situation of life and death like firefighting, right? That's pretty important that I know that my boss is not going to put me in harm's way because he doesn't like me, right? But in sports, it translates as well. So I think there's lots of like different skills, gratitude practices, right? Wake up every morning and send a text to someone that you care about that says, um, you know, hey Zach, I know I don't say this enough to you, but I just wanted to tell you how much you mean to me. Dot dot dot. Right? Do that. Shut your phone off. See what comes back. Right? Now, if Zach comes back and goes, dude, are you drunk? Well, it probably means that like you don't do this enough, right? That you don't express your gratitude. But we know through science and research and our own feeling that when we are grateful, we elevate emotions, and working from an elevated state of emotions, you're probably going to perform better as well.
Mm. I love that. I think I love the story that you mentioned with the firefighter, just even bringing that to awareness. And I think that's the power of you posing that question.
Yeah.
Like I think that's sometimes it's come up recently. I even just was reminded of one of the own clips that I've shared from my own podcast recently with Chris Peterson, the former head football coach at Washington and Boise State. And one of the things that he said is when he talks about advocating for coaches having their own coach or having their own thought partner is just somebody to ask you different questions, better
Yeah.
questions, questions that you would have maybe been blind to or not considered, that helps you find the answers from within. And I think what you just shared is a beautiful example of that in that population and with that particular leader. Where I'd be interested for a moment is you kind of touched on this earlier that after you all kind of break down some of the qualities and characteristics of a great team captain, you dive into the responsibilities. And this is like the fun part to me because this is where like it gets challenging. This is where some of the different distractions, the different self-doubts, all the different things that come into sometimes us not taking action to lead maybe can come into play. So when you all thought about the responsibilities of great team captains, which are some of those that those individuals embrace versus maybe a less effective team captain maybe avoids or doesn't actually lean into?
Um, I mean, there's a lot, right? I think number one, right, we start that section with sometimes you lead from the front and sometimes you lead from behind. Um, Jerry and my both our dads were New York City firefighters. His dad was a battalion chief. He says he learned everything he needed to learn about leadership when he was 12 years old in the chief's car. And everyone's standing outside a burning building, and he's sitting in the front seat, and his dad rolls up, puts on his gear, grabs the hose, and says, "Let's go." Right? That's one type of leadership. My dad died a year ago, and at his funeral, um, when he was one of his things when he had to become a volunteer firefighter, a lot of the volunteers outside New York, they some of them became professional firefighters, and he would always drive them into their first day of work and things like that. But one of the firefighters came up and told my brother and I this story of like how he said, my first fire, when you're a probationary firefighter, um, your job, your first fire is you're first on the hose and you got to go into that building. And he said, I'll never forget your dad stood behind me and he put his hand on my shoulder. And he was like, I got your back, but you got to do this. You got to go first. And so leadership is also about delegation, and it's about um, giving other people chance to have a voice, to lead, to do different things. And so it's not that I have to do everything and it's overwhelming. It's what can I delegate and what are the things that only I can do. But that influence of a senior firefighter or a senior football captain saying to a younger person or a less experienced person, hey, it's your turn now. And I got your back on this, and I'm going to be here to watch your back, but you got to do it. That's that's leadership as well. And so again, this myth that it's always like follow me, it's Braveheart. Like no, sometimes you got to lead from behind, and sometimes you got to lead from the front. Um, the other like another one that I think is one of my favorites, and this was kind of a chapter we wrote in the Champion Teammate book as well, is this idea of thermostats versus thermometers. Um, right? Was a thermometer do it takes the temperature? Was a thermostat do it adjusts the temperature? And great leaders are thermostats, right? That they know that hey, here's a time to raise the temperature. Here's a time to bring it down. We're losing our heads. We got to keep composure in this moment. And so those two things, like that little distinction right there. Am I a thermostat or a thermometer? Do I play just like if we're having a good game, I'm having a good game. But if we're struggling, I'm struggling, right? Versus like, no, I can raise and lower the temperature of the group. When practice isn't good, I'll get everyone focused and playing better. When the referee's making bad calls, I keep everyone focused on the task. It's just things like that. And I think people read that and go, oh yeah, I can relate to that.
Mhm. I, I love that. even just the emphasis on the delegation piece, because one of the things that came up for me is, there's so many great resources out there on how to lead, how to grow in leadership. But at the end of the day, like I had somebody tell me once, they were like, listen, like you can read all those things and listen, and that can help. But at the end of the day, like you got to go lead. Like you got to go out and have opportunities to do so. And I think when you are a leader, just the gift that you can give someone else by creating an opportunity for them to lead and then doing exactly what your dad did, which is like having the arm around them saying, hey, I got your back. Like I'm here with you. You're not doing it alone, but I am giving you this space to go out and to do it. And I think that's so powerful.
But can I just say
Do,
something to that, which
please,
is like
please.
personal experience as well? Working with a couple of college teams during COVID, where they had seasons canceled or postponed or moved from fall to spring and things like that. And then all those kids got that extra year of eligibility. So then we had a lot of, years where 2 years of kids were graduating, right? And what had happened is we were very intentional about leadership development beforehand. So it's like, okay, these are the leaders. Who's the next crew coming up? They're part of these meetings. We know who's going to be the next captains. We know who's going to be in this group. We see who's stepping up. All this sort of stuff. But when we sort of had this like upper class heavy teams, and then they all disappeared at the same time, um, it created a leadership void. And these kids who were all of a sudden sort of like thrust into leadership positions never really had a voice because there was 10 or 12 or 15 kids above them that had the voice. Whereas when we had 5 kids or 6 kids graduating a year, there was always the underclassmen who had the voice. And I wasn't intentional enough about that. And we had these great groups, right? We had seniors and super seniors and whatever. So it's like, oh, great, look at the leadership. And then the next year it was like, whoa, what just happened? So, you know, a big responsibility is developing the next leaders, identifying and developing who can step up and take your place. And I don't think, certainly in the high school level, too many coaches or kids think about that.
No, no, I think even maybe older or beyond that, I think
Even
it's
maybe
still,
older.
yeah, yeah. I think it certainly shows up in the professional world too, of just, leaders are multipliers, and how do you continue to amplify those around you to take on those opportunities and to stretch themselves. You know, I want to come back to in a moment the leadership development piece, because I know with coaches listening to this, parents, different leaders in different spaces, athletic directors, and so on, there's going to be a lot of interest in like, okay, how do we train some of this? How do we cultivate it? And what are some of the recommendations that you and Jerry have shared with other teams and coaches? But before doing so, what I think is also great about your book is I think maybe my favorite section was where you dove into challenges
Hmm.
specifically. What I loved about this was we know from a learning design standpoint that emotion is a very powerful driver of learning and behavior change. The
Hmm.
best way to tap into emotion is to get clear on the challenges that people are running into and
Hmm.
navigating and tying that into what you teach and so forth. So I love that you had a whole section in here allocated to, I think, some very real and like difficult challenges that different leaders face, particularly at the amongst athletes and players. So could you speak to that a little bit, and what have been some of the ones that you and Jerry have found maybe again are most challenging? I know earlier you mentioned the difficult conversations, whether it's diving deeper into that or others that you all have seen.
Yeah. So when we put this section, I did a lot of the heavy lifting on this section. We reached out to tons of coaches that we knew, high school, college level, great club coaches, stuff like that, and asked them this and said, ask your captains as well, like hear from them, and then some of them put us in touch with their captains, and so that was really cool because there was definitely, we have 10 challenges in there, but those ones that I mentioned before, like having difficult conversations in person and holding your friends accountable, um, trying to be perfect all the time. So many kids feel like, oh, I've been identified as the captain and I got to be great in school and I got to be great on the field, and just never being able to shut it off, and taking some time to just going to shut off my phone. I'm not going to do that. Like so many of the college captains that I deal with who are really trying to do a good job, just they feel overwhelmed. Like I'm everyone's babysitter, or I'm everyone's everything, and I don't, I need to focus on my game. So these things were really consistent challenges, and we're like, well, if we know they're going to come up, because I can guarantee anyone coaching anything this year is going to have a moment where one of your athletes is going to have to hold a friend accountable that their friend's not practicing hard, they're not training hard, they're showing up late, they got a bad attitude, whatever it is. If you know what's going to happen, why not get a rep at that, right? Like, if you know a team's going to play this offense, you practice the defense against them. Well, practice the defense against these things that tear locker rooms apart so that at least when they happen, as a coach, you'd be like, okay, we went through this. We sort of game this out. How are we going to deal with it? Versus like, oh my God, panic moment. What are we going to do?
Mm, mm. Within that now, I'm kind of interested because I think part of this is to take on and embrace some of these challenges, whether they're difficult conversations or some of the other ones. Like the word that comes up for me, and I don't know if how this word resonates for you, is like the amount of courage it takes. Like, I mean, I know we've already talked about firefighters and first responders, and very much so professions that when you think of courage and in professionalism, that's I think for many one of the first populations that come to mind. When it comes to fostering or tapping into courage for athletes in order to lead well, how do you all explain that, or how do you all feel like that role or that characteristic is important to kind of hone or train in the next generation of leaders?
One of the things that we talk about a lot is the difference between being liked and respected. And I think this is a really important nuance. Um, and I'll ask kids, like, who controls whether you're liked, right? It's not you. You can do whatever you want. And I could do everything, and Zach could still be like, I don't like that dude. He's an idiot, right? So if I spend my whole time trying to be liked, I give up agency. I'm giving you power over me. I'm giving you control because there's nothing I can do that can really make your decision for you. Whereas if I seek to be respected, and by respected, it's like, okay, I exceed the standards. I show up early. I stay late. I work really hard. I do all these things. I pick up. I clean the locker room. I treat people well. You might not like me, but most people are going to be like, yeah, okay, but he does everything that we ask and more. And so I think that's kind of, as a leader, is just recognizing that you go for respect first, and to be liked second. And when you're respected, most people are going to like you, especially those who want to compete, want to win a championship, want to get after it. Um, and those who don't, who put you down, like, like I meet so many coaches, and I think probably you have too, Zach, who just every coach at the professional level and even the college level faces a time where they have a choice between remaining their authentic self, and following their values, or compromising them to keep their job. And my experience is that anyone who compromises who they are to try to be liked, to try to hold a job, a lot of them get fired anyway. Now you've given up everything and you still lost your job. At least if you're going to lose your job, don't give up your soul. And I think this is like as an athlete as well. If I'm not going to be liked, at least I haven't compromised who I am and the standards. And eventually, hopefully in life, I'll surround myself with people like me who really care about what we stand for here.
Yeah, yeah. As you described that, it reminded me one of the women, one of the women that I interviewed on the podcast was Joanne McCauley. She was the head women's basketball coach at Duke, and one of the things that she talked about was just like getting to a point where it was like I can't let this profession just take my soul. And now that's something that she's become very passionate about and helping others navigate it because there are so many challenges. And then to your point, very much so, you see this where those values that we hold closely, they get challenged, they get threatened. There are other people that have a voice, that have a vote and an influence on how things are, and it's very easy to next thing you know compromise and give way to some of those things, and next thing you know you're leading from a scoreboard that you didn't define for yourself.
Did you talk with I don't know or have never met or spoken to Chris Peterson, but I read the article in the Athletic about when he called Sean McVay out of the blue, right? And what a great article! Like and just he saw a coach Sean McVay who'd won a Super Bowl and on the surface, but he looked at him and said, "Are you okay?" And they didn't know each other, right? But Chris Peterson had the courage to make the phone call, the empathy to make the phone call, and then the body of work to be like, I know what it's like to be in that seat, and you're going to lose yourself unless you do something different, right? And Sean McVay's talked about how that really saved him, and because those of us who are really passionate about things, I mean, those same qualities that make you great can eat you up inside as well.
They can, and I think it ties in a maybe indirect, direct way with, you mentioning the self-awareness at the beginning and just getting clear on your values, getting clear on your why, your purpose, and all those different things, and getting clear on just who you are as a human being, and your identity matters immensely because that's what I think sometimes, not just even professional sport, but we're seeing this now certainly show up in other forms all the way down. I mean, you even see horror stories, and you know this better than I do at the youth sport level, like the way the landscape has evolved and some of the pressures that even leaders and coaches face in that realm today are about as suffocating as they've ever been. With that, one of the things I did want to talk about the development of leaders and these skills, but I think before we do that, it probably would be wise to, let's say a coach is listening to this and they're trying to figure out like, okay, great, like I'm bought in. This is something that I need to invest intentional time and energy into for my teams. One thing that comes up often is like, well, who do I select? And or like, do I make them a captain? Do I give them a role by title? Or do I extend just more responsibility to these individuals for being more of a leader in the locker room? Could you talk a little bit about what you and Jerry have found in terms of like identifying leaders in the locker room? And also, are there specific examples that come to mind that you've seen from coaches or leaders that have worked well in doing so?
Yeah, and one thing we didn't write about, and this is a captain's development, a leader development. This isn't a how to pick your captains book, because I think every program is different, right? If I have a thriving culture and great upperclassmen leadership and they're investing in others, it becomes pretty obvious. If I have a terrible culture and I'm trying to turn something around, because people ask us like, well, should the players vote or should the coach pick them? And it depends, right? If I have this incredible culture, I at least want to know what the players think, right? Who are they seeing? And so there's lots of ways to do that, right? Like, okay, what are the most important qualities of leadership? List two or three teammates who exhibit those the most. And if the same two or three names come up all the time, well, there's your captains, right? But if no one really comes up or it's all over the place, whew, I need more of a say in it, and then I got to pour into some people a little bit more. Um, so I just think I don't know. I don't remember the beginning of your question, but like I just think as a coach, I'm looking for behaviors. I'm looking for who do people tend to gravitate towards, and is he or she doing the right thing? Because we can have people gravitate towards people who do the wrong things as well. So what's your body language like? Are you leading from everywhere, right? If I have a young player who's on the sideline and is engaged and cheering, whatever, that's someone I'm looking at as like, okay, he or she's not playing yet, but man, they are contributing to this group. Whereas, someone who's there sulking, I don't care how talented they are or anything. It's like that's not, they're dragging people down. And you can see that. You can go look at a bench and you see, 90% engaged and two people sitting over here all frumpy. And, those aren't, I don't care what year they are, those aren't future leaders right there. And they're having influence, it's just not good influence. So
Hmm.
I think it just, there's lots of ways. So you're looking like who's leading themselves, right? That's the start. So who does the right things, then who leads their classmates, who leads their position groups, and then you can lead the team. But a lot of people come like, I want to lead the team. I'm like, you don't even lead yourself. You don't do the right stuff for yourself. You came into preseason, you're not even fit, and you want to lead the team. Come on, man.
I love that. No, that's well said, and I appreciate. I think it was Dan Meskey. He's the University of Louisville volleyball coach, and one of the things that he shared on his is like not just having it be set in stone either year to year, where it's like, hey, every year we're gonna select certain captains. I think he allows each year to, in essence, be its own unique season and allow things to kind of unfold maybe organically, which I think ties in well with what you're describing, that there is no singular way to do it, and very much it can be contextual to the team.
There was a pro soccer team this year, Bodo Glimt from Norway, who had a really long run in the Champions League, and they didn't have a captain. They had a leadership group, and that group would nominate someone every game to be captain. That doesn't really happen in soccer, at the international level, but that's how they felt like, hey, this group is really led by a bunch and not one, and so let's embrace that. The New Zealand All Blacks they have a captain, but they're very big on leadership groups. And over the course of a week before a game, the players taking more and more responsibility. So by Friday, the leadership group is running practice. But then, you have to give them the opportunity to solve problems as well. One of Cindy Timshel, all-time winningest lacrosse coach, her and Jerry won 7 national titles together at Maryland. This year they went Final 8 at Naval Academy. And one of her former players told me the story, right? They were, she was a team captain and was like, so and so's doing this and that, coach, and what are we going to do? And Cindy goes, okay, I'm going to be 15 minutes late to practice today. You guys solve it. There you go. Right? That's pretty good coaching right there. I trust my captains, but now you need to solve this problem. You don't need me to intervene. You have to fix it. Right? And I'm not going to be there. That's pretty cool.
That's a very cool story. I think that's a I'm thinking about just some of my own experience. I helped coach a long. This is a total sidebar. That's a very quick, but I helped a friend out, and we volunteer coached a high school girls varsity basketball team this winter. And we
Hmm.
probably had a couple of moments where we could have used that a little bit. So I wish I had had this interview with you about 6 months ago. That would have helped me out tremendously, and that was a
Yeah.
whole nother awesome experience. Talk about learning and whatnot, but I love that. I I want to kind of come down to kind of the end here, and I want to go back to one thing that you shared at the beginning, which is this idea of like viewing leadership as a skill. What are things that could be, in essence, the equivalent of, let's call them practice reps for developing as a leader that a coach could implement with their teams, and or if there's a captain or somebody aspiring to lead or have a greater influence in a locker room, somebody reading this book, what are things that they could do in essence to kind of get practice reps as a leader?
I mean, I think any leader, whether it's a captain and it's my underclassmen, or I'm a coach and I'm is looking for opportunities to delegate and spaces for people to lead. So what part, right? Can they lead the warm up? Can they lead community service projects? Can they, come up with the playlist, clean the locker room, pick up the gear? Where can I give them input on how we're going to practice? How's the team feeling? Do we need a hard practice? Do we need an easy one? So I think as a coach, I'm always looking for, if I want people to lead, I got to give them reps, right? I can't expect them to lead on Saturday if I do all the leading Monday through Friday. And so looking for those opportunities depending on your sport, and depending on the sport, as a coach, you're going to know, oh yeah, okay, I can think of moments where people can I can step back. Now it doesn't mean I just go away, right? I'm still engaged, but I'm letting them lead that. So, for example, when I was a soccer coach, and um, when I my teams would play at the end of practice, instead of a 30-minute scrimmage, we'd often scrimmage 3 times 8-minute games, and 2 minutes in between. So I want high intensity, balls on the sideline, ball goes out, next ball's in. So high level, as game like as possible. But then now 2 minutes, each team breaks up, and there's a person assigned to coach the group, and then report back in the middle after 90 seconds. What's the one thing you said to your group that you're going to aim for this next go around? Let's play again. By an injured player, instead of sitting on the sideline futzing around, all right, you're coaching that group and you're coaching that group. So, and then you're going to come back and lead, right? So I want you engaged, and I want you to fix the problems. So, like, one of my proudest moments as a coach was right at the end. I was coaching, it was under 17, travel soccer team. And I give my players a lot of ownership, but then they also have to have the courage eventually to step up. And I just remember this one game, really important game. Um, Halftime rolls around, team walks off the field, team captain goes, "Coach, give me the whiteboard," comes over, draws up the thing, solves the problem, and then they look at me. I'm like, "I'm good. That's it." Right? That's but I had to give him the space for a long time and a lot of reps and practice so that he would fix it in a game. Because as a soccer coach, I need the intelligence on the field, right? Not on the sideline. I can't solve the problems for you there. And so I think these are the type of things. So where can I find moments over and over and over for people to lead, so that in the big moments when I need them to lead, they're there?
This is maybe it runs parallel to the book, and I know we've spent a lot of the conversation talking about, leadership, particularly with a microscope on, athletes themselves, but you've had hundreds of conversations with elite leaders, coaches, and if we were to kind of just like zoom out just for a moment, this can tie into certainly youth, or not just youth athletes, but athletes themselves, or just really any leader listening to this. What have been some of the bigger lessons that you feel like you've taken from all the conversations that you've had about leadership that maybe people still get wrong, or that people are still kind of wrestling with, that you're finding get illuminated over and over again?
Um, Two big ones. Number one, leadership is about relationships. It's not about position. It's about influence, and influence comes from relationships. So the better that I am at the relationship game, the more influence I'm going to have, the more ability to lead I'm going to have. That is a 100% across the board. I never had any coach after almost 500 episodes say, yeah, no, relationships don't matter. I've watched a lot of coaches think relationships don't matter, and they don't last very long, right? And number two, curiosity. Like, every conversation that we've had with Steve Kerr, when we stop recording, he goes, "What books are you guys reading?" Right? Anything I should be looking at, right? And I think there's something, like, the people at the really highest level of coaching are always looking for the next advantage. What can I do? What can I learn? What can I study? And the people who are pushing up against that but not there, sometimes it's ego. I know it all. It's my way or the highway. Now, you have to have authentic ways you go about things, and you have to have belief in what you do. But the idea that I'm not open to anything new and I'm going to coach the same way over and over and over. So, I'm most impressed by the Tara Vanderveers of the basketball world, right? Who can win national championships 29 years apart, right? Or Gino, sustained excellence, Anson Dorrance, sustained excellence. Like if you can, so people go, oh, kids these days, like, yeah, the kids are changing. And as a coach, if I'm the same, I'm getting left behind.
Yeah. I think that's it's a beautiful way, and I can just think through some of the leaders and coaches that I've spent the most time with. I think you just hit the nail on the head with probably two of the characteristics that I've seen the most, that ability to connect, that ability to be curious, and how those go hand in hand. Certainly to foster, meaningful relationships goes a long way. And also I think it helps us. One of the things, the last thing I'll say with the book is I know you and Jerry talk a little bit about like kind of leaving the jersey better than you found it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just that deeper level impact. And I think that at the heart of that, without a relationship, that's going to be really difficult, in
Yeah.
essence, to create. So, what I wanted to do here as we wrap up, John, is for those listening to this, if they're like, hey, tell me more. How can I keep learning? How can I read the book, etc.? I want to kind of give you a chance to share where folks can maybe get connected with you or where they can learn more.
Yeah, so I mean, get in the book, Captain, Amazon, and it's always it's always an adventure when a book first comes out. It's like it's ready, and then they're like 2 months, So hopefully Barnes and Noble and all those other ones too. But yeah, so Amazon there, or Changing the Game Project is my website, and you can get it there. Um, that's the best way to sort of connect. You can email me, John, JOHN at changingthegameproject.com if you want, 10 or more. We discount the orders. And we've already had a lot, even, before the book was released, of people like, this is it. We're training. We got 60 captains at our high school. And so we give you a really good deal because we just want to make a difference. And what I want to say, um, this book, unlike any others, we built a curriculum around it, and so what we did is we took these 30, these qualities and responsibilities and challenges, and turned it into like 10 sessions, 45 minutes each. So if I'm someone at a school running captains leadership training, or I just want to go through this with my own team captains, and we want to meet once a week, it's sort of like, hey, this week read chapters 1 and 2, answer the questions for yourself. But then when you come to the session, we've already gone to level 2. So it's like, how can you discuss these stories you're reading in the book? What's prompts for you to ask? And then what are some reflection questions or activities that those leaders can do to take a deeper dive beyond what they might have done on their own? Like the book, at those questions, the end of every chapter, have a couple lines. It want it to be a workbook. But then we also want people who are developing these leaders to be able to teach it and be like, man, how do I tackle this? It's like, here it is. Now it's not the only way, but here's one way that you go through 10 sessions over the course of your school year, or whatever you want, or over the course of the summer with your captains, so that when fall rolls around, you're like, all right, I feel like they have a really good handle on this.
That's
and that's
tremendous.
and
No,
that's for
there's
free. Like, it's in the back of the book. There's a QR code. You scan it. You give me your email. You're going to get this nice PDF and everything. And you can buy it if you'd rather have it printed on Amazon. But I suggest you get it for free.
beautiful. No, that's tremendous. There's as hopefully those tuning in can hear. There's a lot of different ways to continue to keep the conversation going, keep refining your own ideas, strategies, and ways in which to implement this with your athletes. And also, if there's any athletes tuning in, this is going to be a great resource for anybody that wants to increase their impact and influence in the locker room. So, John, I just want to thank you again for taking some time out of the busy schedule with all the different hats and things that you've got going on in your world. I'm honored again to play host this time in a conversation, and excited for others to get a chance to hear this episode soon.
Well, I don't have a lot of hair, so I need a lot of hats, man. And and thank you, Zach. I mean, you're a great conversationalist and really, really probing questions. I had to think deeply a lot for this one, and so those are always the best conversations when you look at the clock and you're like, "Wow, that went by fast." So yeah, I just hope anyone listening, reach out, go to Change the Game Project, email me directly if you're looking for ideas or facing challenges, because we just want to make a difference, and hopefully this book will make a difference for a lot of kids out there.
Yeah, I have no doubt that it will. Awesome. Thanks so much, John.
Thanks.